Yu-Gi-Oh is a really fun game. I have enjoyed it for about 2 decades at this point, and I know a lot of other players have enjoyed it for a really long time, if not even longer than myself. But Yu-Gi-Oh isn't without problems, and one big one is often the price of cards. And for a lot of people, depending on how much they want to put into their hobby, they're not willing to put a lot onto or into a meta deck. But that doesn't mean they want to just play something bad the entire time, or that there shouldn't be good options for them. And that's why today I'm going to be showing you guys a budget deck that you could be playing to keep up at the top level of Yu-Gi-Oh! Within this series, I've already showed you guys Hurley and Marincess. Both decks are honestly still solid options if you want to go for budget decks, but I want to give you guys constant variety of budget decks you can use that can keep up at a decent level for locals and regionals, as well as be really cheap, both in engine and not require the expensive non-engine that would kind of shut you out. Cough, cough, SP, like right now. And I figured with the new megatins coming out, it'd be a great time to highlight some new reprint products, as the last time we did this video was with the Pearly reprints in Rarity Collection 2. And around these sets is usually the best time to build a budget deck. So let's talk about it. Now, before I continue, if you enjoy these types of videos where we go over budget decks to make sure that everyone has a good option to play, then please consider liking and subscribing. As well as if you have any opinions on this deck or other budget decks that are viable to play, please comment down below. Because there's always cool and creative options that somebody could come up with, and you know, I'm only one person with one deck in front of me. Sorry, and if this series gets enough support, I will do it on a more frequent basis, because there is a little more rogue-ish strategies that are still solid enough that you can bring to locals, and is not very expensive. So I figure there's no harm in doing more stuff like this. So when I was planning this video, I was hoping to build something like Centurion or Labyrinth, because fresh off some reprints from the tins, in theory they would have been cheaper. However, at least the time that I'm making this video, these tins suck. And I don't mean to bash Konami too much, because I know that'll kind of ruin any chance I have a sponsorship with them. So pretty much any good reprint that would have decreased in price is a secret rare. And because there's 100 different secret rares and you only get 3 secret rares per tin, the chance of you getting an actually good card is pretty low. And because of that, a lot of cards that you would have expected to go down largely in price haven't gone down that much. And even though they had gone down, it's not enough for me to confidently say it's a budget deck. Because one thing, I want the deck to not have really expensive staples, and SP will still probably be at least like 30 USD minimum, depending on how few people get in tins. And also, I want the core engine of the deck itself to be relatively cheap. That way, if you don't already have staples, it's not going to cost you an arm and leg to then suit out your deck with staples. I will recommend you get staples, because all these budget deck videos will have at least a similar core of cards like Ashen and Permanence. And after you get those cards, and the rest of the decks that you build will be a lot cheaper. But yeah, pretty much there's nothing useful in these. And I was very sad that, at least right now, I can't show you guys any cool budget decks from the tins. So while the plan was to be able to show off something cool here, that's not happening. And if that changes in the future, then I can reevaluate and have a budget deck showing off the tins. Maybe Labyrinth cards drop in price. We'll see. So I went all the way back to Rarity Collection 2 and found another option that got reprinted to make it pretty cheap overall. It was a deck that was super meta about 2 years ago, and even a year ago is still kept up. And even though it's not hyper meta today, it is still a very playable deck, and I think is an interesting one that has a very different playstyle than the 2 decks we featured on this series before. And if you haven't already guessed it, it is Exosisters. So Exosisters is a deck that I actually lost to in the YCS finals. My World Championship teammate, Raymond Dye, beat me in the finals YCS Niagara, and that's where the famous Dimensional Shifter picture comes from, where I'm just staring at him dead in the eyes after he shifters me in the finals, because at that point I know my fate is sealed. And this deck went toe-to-toe with that Element deck. And I think even if you play versus a top tier deck, you don't need to get that crazy lucky in order to win, albeit you probably have a bit of a rough match with Pursue Bell, which does suck, as it is the best deck in the format if you're trying to be super competitive. But let me get into what the Exosister cards do. And this is going to be a pretty comprehensive deck profile, because I want this to be very beginner friendly, and I think this is a good starting point if you want to get more into more competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! This wouldn't be a full dive into tier 1 Yu-Gi-Oh!, but this would get you solidly into competitive Rogue. So Exosisters is an XYZ based deck. Pretty much your entire extra deck will be XYZs, and most of those XYZs will be Exosister cards, because the Exosister XYZs are all extremely above average as far as rank 4s go. However, in order to use their effects to the max, they require Exosisters as material. So I'm going to give you an example of the 2 Exosister XYZs that are the absolute best, and they will define how the rest of the deck works, so we can keep that in mind while we go through the main deck. The first one is Exosister Michaelis. So I'm going to read it off right now. We're going to play 3 copies of it because it is the most important one, and you actually go through all 3 copies sometimes. So it is generic rank 4 with 2500 attack. A copy is destroyed by a monster special summon from the graveyard. That is actually a bit of a gimmick that this entire deck has, where it has like anti-opponent's graveyard interactions. However, I think it's an overrated aspect of the deck, and you mustn't fixate on it because it's actually not that important. However, it is still good to know because obviously if your opponent plays into it, you can punch them pretty bad. But anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. The reason to play this card is for its next 2 effects. That is, if you control this card that was Exceed Summon this turn by using an Exosister monster as material, you can quick effect to target a card your opponent controls or in the graveyard and banish it. So this is great because it just banishes field or graveyard. And I don't have to tell you, that should be pretty good. SP is a good card for a reason. This is that. As well as it has one more bonus effect. And that is, you can detach a material from it to add any Exosister spell trap from your deck to your hand. And there are good Exosister spell and traps, so that is important context to know. But this card is fantastic because it's going to progress your combo, get advantage, as well as provide a way to push through stuff. And in a world where you can exceed some of this on your opponent's turn, it's actually disruption. A bit of foreshadowing, your deck does that a lot. You're going to be exceed summoning on your opponent's turn a lot, and that's when this card being a banish is very good. So this is going to be one of the most important cards in the deck. Now, the next most important card is the card you pair alongside it, Exosister Magnifica. This is a rank 8, but it's not because you play level 8, it's because of its ability. So it requires 2 rank 4 Exosisters. So pretty much you can overlay this plus something else, and we'll get to the other Exceeds after, but these are the most important ones for sure. And it has a couple abilities. For one, it can make 2 attacks during each battle phase. This is going to be largely why this deck is pretty good at going second. It can OTK pretty fast with a 2800 attack stat line. It also has the ability that once per turn, during either player's turn, you can quick effect attach material to banish 1 card your opponent controls. And this is not going to be a targeting. So this is a great way of dealing with some cards that, you know, have that protection of being untargetable, as well as it is just generically good removal. Again, banishing again from the field is fantastic, but that's not all. It has another ability. And then as when your opponent activates a card effect, you can swap it back into the extra deck and then Exceed Summon 1 Exosister monster that was material as it on top of it. So pretty much what you're going to do is you overlay this plus one other Exosister, attach the other Exosister to banish a card on their turn, and then when they activate a card effect, you tag this out and swap it into this. Then the Michaelis, because it Exceed Summon this turn, will give you a quick effect banish. So this combo will act as a double banish. This one can be from the field to grave, and this is from the field non-targeting. So it's a little bit versatile, but is extremely strong. These are going to be the core of your deck. You can play 3 of each for that reason. Now, Magnifica, you can get away with 2. However, it really doesn't cost much, so getting 3 is fine. As well as if you are playing versus a Kashtira deck for whatever reason, then you don't want to let them cash your unicorn this because 2 can come up in grind games for sure. Now I'm going to get into the monsters of the deck. And this is obviously going to be your main win conditions. And the first up is probably the most expensive card, and it's only $3. And that is Exosister Martha. This is actually a newer wave of support for the deck, and it really tied this deck all together because it is incredibly strong. And if you've heard people call new support being Exosister Martha or Circulars, that they're talking about a card that has the same crazy like custom level effect because this card is nuts. You control no monsters or only XYZ monsters. You can special summon this card from your hand and then summon 1 Exosister Ellis from your deck. And then during this turn, you cannot summon monsters except Exosisters. So that's why this deck is not something you play SP in, and why you don't have to go too far out of non-engine to make this all work. It also has the ability that if a card moves out of either graveyard, you can special summon 1 Exosister XYZ on top of this card as an Exceed Summon. So what that essentially is going to do is if you get stopped or whatever and you have to just normal summon this and you get interrupted, and then they summon from the graveyard or they banish a card from the grave, or even if you call by the grave their card, you can rank up on top of it, summon this, and now you have a banish. And if it's your turn, then you can detach and search. So that's very strong. And all the Exosisters actually have this type of ability to rank up. However, this one is slightly better. The other Exosisters have the same rank up ability, but you'll read it here. This one says, if your opponent moves a card in either graveyard. The difference being that this one triggers if either player moves. This one will trigger if only your opponent moves. So this one will not trigger if you call by their card, but if they try and call by your card, like in Master Duel, they call by your Maxi, these will trigger to rank up. All of the other ones. They all do this, all the monsters. So Martha's going to be insane because it sets up a lot of your plays. Martha, for example, is a 1-card Michaelis, and that is fantastic. And you can see how we built upon that combo even more. Exosister Ellis is the name that corresponds with Martha, and all the Exosisters, or most Exosisters, will have a pair of Exosisters that kind of work in conjunction with each other. And this matters for some of the spells and trap supports, as they tell you to do an ability that references the other Exosister in a certain card, and it's important to keep these combinations in mind. Now, these cards don't only work with their specific pair, they do work just in broad terms, but they get bonus abilities. So you kind of see what I mean here with Ellis. So Ellis says if you control an Exosister monster, any of them, you can special summon from the hand. And then if you control its pair, Stella, Exosister Stella, you gain 800 life. So the 800 life isn't huge, so it's not super important that you control Stella, but obviously if you can't get that, then nice. And then again, you have the rank up ability, so that is pretty cool. So this just summons itself and sets up rank 4 plays. You are playing 3 of this because you need them in deck as targets for this, as well as drawing it is a fine extender, even if it isn't brilliant by modern standards. Stella is also a very average extender. We are playing 2 it because you need the names in this deck. Unfortunately, you can't run 2 trim account of Exosisters, otherwise you will brick or run out of resources. This deck can run out of resources if you aren't careful, so you just need to be conscious of it, and also why you can't play too few. Stella also has the rank up ability, of course, if your opponent removes cards out of either graveyard, but this one says that you can special summon an Exosister from your hand, and then if you control Ellis, because these are the pair, you gain 800 life points. So then moving on to the next pair, we got Sophia. So Sophia is a cool one. You play 2 of this one, and then this pair Irene is one of, because Irene kind of sucks. Sophia is not going to be an extender, but rather a way of generating advantage when you draw an excess of Exosister cards. It says if you control any other Exosister, you can draw 1. So when you have a lot of extenders, it can turn this into something else, and hopefully you draw into non-engine like Ash Blossom and Permanence, and do something more meaningful with it. And then if you control Exosister Irene, you gain 800 life points, so that'll be kind of cool. Now, the spells and traps do pay life points, so being able to offset that can be kind of nice. Not that your life points really matters too much in this deck, like you're not going to be paying that much in abundance that you'll have a problem, but, you know, good to have. No one's going to complain about free things. Now, Irene is just strictly worse than Sophia. You just play it so you have a pair in the deck, because some of the spells or traps need you to have the pair. And that is, you can place an Exosister card from your hand at the bottom of your deck to draw 1, and if you control Sophia, you gain 800 life points. And again, it can rank up. So this gives you a suite of monsters here, which is not too many monsters, but we have extra ways at consistency. Pax, for example, is one of them, which lets you pay 800 life points during the main phase to add any Exosister card from your deck to your hand. An instant 3 of in the deck for sure. Now, it's important to note is it can add any card, so it can add the traps, which is important if you have too many monsters, or it can add your monsters. Now, it does actually have an additional ability that's all part of the same effect, and that is if you added a monster, you can special summon it if the corresponding Exosister listed on its text is in your graveyard. So if Irene is in your grave and you add Sophia, you can summon Sophia. And if you added Irene and Sophia's in your grave, you can summon Irene. Conversely, you got Stella and Ellis that work with each other, and Martha only works with Ellis in the grave. There's nothing that works with Martha in the grave, because Martha was a new one. There's no corresponding one with Martha. Martha's corresponding one is Ellis for some reason, so Ellis works with both Martha and with Stella. But yeah, so it's a way of turning this into not just a Rhoda, but emergency teleport. So this card can be Rhoda for traps, Rhoda as a starter, or E-Telly, depending on where you need to go. This is important because remember, these cards rank up when your opponent moves out of the grave, and this is something that works on resolution. So if your opponent goes Monster Reborn, for example, and you control no Exosisters, and you chain this to add this from deck to hand, then special summon it, now it'll see they moved a card, because this will be Chain Link 2, Chain Link 1 they use Monster Reborn, and then you get to rank up. And this may not be the card you want to rank up to, but this is still a banish at the very least. Now turning this into an effective banish, where if you already had your trap cards, you have another layer of disruption. So next up, we got the Exosister trap cards, and these are important because, remember, we do have access to these via this, as well as they can be a way of getting through a grind. Now, I have to apologize, I was missing a couple cards for this deck list, so you will see some proxies. My printer also broke, so I had to use my work printer, which is not, like my card selling printer, which is not made for proxies. But first up, we got Vaudeo. This one's not a proxy. This was the original wave of support. This is that you pay 800 life points to special summon 2 Exosisters from the deck. They return to the deck in the end phase. But what's important about this is they have to summon ones that correspond with each other. So you can summon Sophia and Irene, or Stella and Ellis. And that's why you have to make sure you have these copies in the deck. Otherwise, this becomes unusable. And this card is very good. Now, there are some versions that will play one of this. However, I feel like this card can be good in grind games as a way of just summoning bodies to start playing. For example, if you draw like Shifter and that's it, or you get Ashton Martha, you need time, this can apply a lot of pressure on the following turn. But also, if your opponent moves a card out of the graveyard and you chain this in the same way with Pax, this will summon 2 Exosisters, letting you double rank up, which will really just end the game on the spot, or at least do a lot to beat your opponent, because the double rank up is a huge shift in resources. So drawing this card is not bad at all, and there are some games where you get into a grind and the double special summon can be very high value. Returnia is probably the better one, and if there's one you for sure play 2 of, it is Returnia, and like every other Exosister spell trap, it will pay 800 to activate. And now this one requires you control all Exosister monsters, and you have the minimum one. And then targets a card your opponent controls or in the graveyard, and then banish it. But then also you can apply one of the following effects, and that is immediately after this, Exceed Summon using your Exosister monsters. So you can, like, if they don't summon out of the grave, you can just turn the Vaudeo plus this into another Exceed, into megatins to banish again. Or what you can do is if you Exceed Summoned a monster this turn, you can banish another card your opponent controls. So if you already ranked up because of Vaudeo, then this turns into a double banish. And you can see here how, while banishing is already one of the best interactions in the game, you now have several layers of banishing your opponent's cards. And you can really keep them off the field. And you can see this deck, like, is very much capable of winning when it goes first. And that's all the engine really has to offer. You can see here the deck is pretty slim, so we will need a couple consistency cards, but outside of that, you'll have space for non-engine. And as I mentioned, Shifter is a very good card in this deck, and that is a very alluring reason to play it. Dimensional Shifter is, without a doubt, one of the best cards in the game, or even ever printed, debatably. So the fact that you can play a deck that can use all 3 copies rather without, like, any sort of risk is fantastic. Because even Tempai, Shifter in that deck is not, like, without flaw. In this deck, the only real thing you lose on Shifter is you can't get the bonus effect attacks. That's really not too important. Now, let's talk about some of the other Exosister XYZs so we get you the full idea of cards in the Exosister arsenal. The next most important one is Caspatel, and it's debatable if this one is as important as these two because it is integral to your combos. It can't be sure by battle with a monster summoned from the graveyard, whatever. But that what it does, if it's Exceed Summoned using an Exosister monster as material, one Exceed Summoned, it can activate its effects, and then neither player can summon monsters from the graveyards for the rest of this turn. So this is going to floodgate your opponent out if you summon this on your opponent's turn, or even on your turn. You can turn off stuff like Garunix and Princess if your opponent's not careful. But that's why this deck can be good against graveyard decks if your opponent's caught off guard, and sometimes even just normal summoning one Exosister can, like, kind of get there. But then the real reason this card is good is for this last effect here, and that is you can detach material to add an Exosister monster to protect your hand. So you can see the ideal play pattern here is if you can get to 2 level 4s in field, you'll Caspatel, add Martha, and then Martha will get Ellis and summon Michaelis. And you can also search one of your trap cards, and then you overlay one of these two for Magnifica. So if all you have is a 1-card rank 4, then you pretty much get this setup. And this setup is going to be the triple banish. Off of 1 monster, this is pretty good. And obviously you have a bit of follow-up as well, because the Michaelis, if it's the card you end on, like after this gets shuffled back, this can detach again, get packs, and then packs will get you back into your combo, and you can kill them. So Caspatel is an extremely important card for this deck. I didn't mention it first because I do think Magnifica and Michaelis are more integral to the strategy, but this card is without a doubt extremely, extremely, extremely important for the deck. Now, next up, these two Exosisters, Jabrin and Asophiel, they are good cards, and you definitely use them in the deck, but they aren't super important, so don't, like, prioritize these. However, we'll go over them real quick. So Asophiel is a generic rank 4 that cannot be destroyed by the activated effects of monsters summoned from the grave, whatever. And then if it's Exceed Summon using Exosister's material, neither player can activate card effects in the graveyard this turn. Neat, and then you can attach one, not a quick effect, to target a monster your opponent controls and return it to the hand. So it's a bounce, which can be nice. It is an Exosister card, so you can make it when your Exosister locked. And stopping graveyard effects is really good on your opponent's turn. So this card's not bad by any means. And in certain matchups, you will prioritize this more, but it's not like nearly as important as the other cards. And focusing on the anti-graveyard aspect of this deck, where you play on your opponent's grave, is kind of like a mistake. The deck is good on its own merits with the banishes, not with the graveyard hate. The graveyard hate is a nice plus side that if it does manage to punish people, it's fantastic, but don't force it. Jibrin is important for OTKs, and what it does is cannot be destroyed by effects of monsters from the grave, whatever. And then it is, you control this card, Exceed Summon using Exosister monster, quick effect, negates a monster's effect, so it's another interrupt. And the reason let's use OTK is the next one is then you can detach a card from this card's material, and for the rest of the turn, all exceeds you control gain 800 attack. And remember that matters because this card attacks twice. So this card goes up to 36 and hits for 36, 36. They have 800 left, and then any odd piece of damage will finish them off. It's very easy for these to be your kill shots, where you set up 3 XYZs, turn 2 of them in Magnifica, and then you have like this plus this on field, for example, and this is like 10,000 damage. So those are the Exosister cards. Let's go over some of the other non-engine. So Shifter is the obvious one, and the rest of the stuff will matter depending on the format, because this is a deck you can play in the future. I don't think this is a deck that will kind of go out of fashion, or at all risk of getting hit. So right now I have Impermanence and Ashes, some of the best hand traps, and then I wanted a mix of other cards. Call by the Grave, because Ash Blossom on your Martha or your Pax can kind of hurt, as well as you can combo this with your Martha to trigger it, to Exceed Summon on your opponent's turn. And Board Breakers are actually pretty good in this deck. as well. So I feel like I didn't have to go all in on the hand traps. That's why I went with Dark Rulers to help crack through fields, Duster, Lightning Storm to kind of do the same thing. Now, if you can't kill them because you're Dark Ruler, you just clear the field, you banish their cards, and then you set up the trap, you set up the the Minifica, and the 3 banishes on the crackback is good enough. Like you can build a decent enough board through a board that it's fine. I'm not playing Gozen match right now because I think it's bad against Senpai and Ebel, but if you're playing in a more casual meta, or if the meta just changes, Gozen match is a fantastic card this deck can use. Now the rest of this deck is going to be consistency cards, and there is one other piece of engine that's not technically an engine card that is going to be important. So first up, we got Prosperity. It's out 1, so you can play 1. But then the real important one here is going to be Aratama and Sakitama. So I'm sorry, I have no idea where these are. I know I have these, they were in my Ashen deck. So editor will put clearer pictures up on screen right now, but I could not find these. I do not know why. So Aratama is the better normal summon of the two. However, this is an extender, and I think it's important. I'll go into the reasoning in a second. But these are their spirits. They cannot be special summoned, and they get returned to the hand during the end phase. So why it matters is they are extenders that do not special summon, which means they don't conflict with Martha. Aratama on summon lets you add any spirit from deck to your hand. Sakitama, when in your hand, because it's a spirit, can reveal itself to normal summon any spirit, including itself. So you can go summon this, add this, summon this, and rank 4. Now remember, any rank 4 will do this. So you can go overlay for Aratari Sakitama or Caspatel, which will add a monster from deck to hand. So we're going to add Martha. Now Martha can summon from the deck Ellis. Ellis will overlay for Magnifica, or attach to add a trap. And let's add our Returnia, the one that banishes, if I can find it somewhere in here, the trap. Now we're going to overlay these two, and these go to the grave when you do this for Magnifica. Probably put in defense player on Lightning Storm, because Lightning Storm is pretty good against this card. And then we'll set this in pass. And yeah, this is pretty good for one card, right? Because you got the banish one, then you detach to banish, and then you rank up. So you detach this, rank up into Michaelis, banish again, banish again. So you get to do a lot of banishing here. Now the reason why I don't play 3 Aratamas is simple. You don't have too many normal summons in this deck, and you can brick on it. Also, if this card gets Impermanence or Veiled or Ash, it is kind of risky, because remember, Martha requires you to control only Exosisters. Or sorry, no monsters, or only XYZs, not only Exosisters. So if you get blocked on Aratama on the field, you can't extend past with Martha, and because it's not an Exosister, you can't summon Ellis afterwards. However, if you even draw like Irene plus Sakitama, this, for example, is still full combo, because you can normal summon Sakitama, reveal normal summon, because it doesn't require Aratama to summon itself, and then go to the Caspatel, and it's the same thing. It's one card less, but it's fine. It still plays, and that's more important. Now, the other thing as well with the Sakitamas is if people are very inclined to negate your Aratama because it'll end your turn, then making sure you have the maximum number of extenders to play through the Imperm is important. So I think this card is overall more important, as well as if you draw 2 of this card, it's still good enough by itself. It's still a combo, where 2 of these is obviously terrible. Now, as for the rest of the extra deck, I don't have it fully built out here. This is 40 cards though in the main. Do not go above 40 with this deck. You can't risk the consistency. The only card you really need, I think, is Zeus. And this is going to be like 10 bucks-ish, so it is a little bit more, but pick it up. This card is fantastic in so many decks. But yeah, this deck is an XC deck, and even if you are locked in Exosister sometimes with Martha, this card can come up for sure. You can play Typhon as well. It did get reprinted of the tins. It's sitting at about 10 bucks right now as well. And it could be a cool card to have to play through grind games, but this card is not super important if you don't want to play it. The other cards don't matter too much. You can play like Donner for hire, because lets you link off Nibiru tokens. But you can play like random link monsters to clear off your field, like Azalea as well. You can play rank 4s like Exiton or Baguska, but they almost never ever come up. I've like never summoned them in Master Duel and testing. I guess Baguska came up in Master Duel when I was getting a max seed, but that doesn't happen in the TCG. So you shouldn't go out of your way looking for those. The biggest thing here is the Exosister cards are the absolute highlight of this deck, and they're just above average rank 4s. So like when you're pressed with the option of summon an Exosister monster or summon something else, the choice is going to be pretty obvious. It's summon an Exosister card. Let me show you guys what this deck may look like if you want to buy it though, because that's obviously why we're here. So as I said, I wanted the core engine of this deck to be around 30 bucks or less. And that's exactly what we have here. Shipping included, I've optimized the cart on TCG Player. You're sitting at about 24 USD, which is, I think, perfect range for a deck, because you can play this for a few months until you get bored of it, or even for as long as you want. I don't think this deck is really going to get hit, and I think it's, at least for now, I can't see it getting phased out of being competent at a local level. And yeah, so let's go through the cards here. The Aratamas here, the Yugioh, Caspitels, Returnia, Sakatamas, the Ellis, the Irenes. Michaelis is a little bit more expensive, so it's $2 each. And then Martha is a little bit more as well, $2. But again, like, this is really like not that crazy. When you're really trying to be conscious, those $2 obviously do add up, but that's why we end up with here instead of another deck. And this one's a little bit more expensive, 55 cents. Okay. I mean, obviously this isn't a lot, but that's how you get to where this deck is right now. That is the core, and that's to see how little it is. Now, if you don't have the other staples, they will cost a bit of money. So you have like Ash Blossom for a couple bucks each. Shifters like nothing. Impermza's like $6 each. Dollars for the set here. A couple dollars for the set there. $2 there. $3 there. $10 there. And like $1 here, right? And between all that, maybe this deck gets out to like $80, maybe $100 after shipping, max and tax. But that's with staples like have to buy. And I think you should buy these staples, because if you buy these staples, anytime I make a rogue video like this, we're looking at a deck that's going to cost like under $30. At least that's the goal, because the goal is to give you a deck that's going to cost you like not much, make it not feel like you're hurting yourself. And also because like this level of deck, you can win back your investment and store credit pretty easily. So that's Exosister, guys. I hope this is something you enjoyed. And I know it is a deep dive into the deck, as it is designed for being beginner friendly and budget friendly. But if you are looking for something different to play, something cheap to play, something fun at locals, then give Exosisters a try. I know my two teammates, Ryu and Raymond Dai, both love this deck and would approve of this message. So let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.